What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. And break down what's happening to Tesla stocks so far and some very important things that came out. And also what you should be watching for as we approach tomorrow. I'm going to talk about why I think that Tesla will most likely see a bounce either tomorrow or by Friday, what technicals are suggesting that, and some very important things to be watching for. But before I break anything down all this information, before I talk about the important levels to watch for on Tesla for both sides and why I think a bounce is coming, let me just mention a couple of things. Firstly, I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100 into the account, you are guaranteed up to 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed up to 15 free stocks, and the offer ends very soon. Anyways, now let's break down what's going on with Tesla. So, in my video from yesterday, I mentioned that Tesla was holding up very nicely and did have some potential to try to hold up and even bounce. But the reason why it didn't bounce is because we had some negative news that came out. And unfortunately, sometimes bad news comes out that you can't always predict, and that could trump indicators sometimes. But in this case, the technicals are suggesting even more strong than yesterday that Tesla could see a nice bounce very soon, and I think that that's still very probable. I'm going to break down some levels about that. What's the bearish case for Tesla? What's the bullish case? And then what I think is more likely. I will go over this in just a few minutes. Let's first talk about some data very, very quickly. So, in the morning, we had some Chinese numbers that came out. The Chinese GDP numbers. I know I don't fully trust the data, but we still have to go off of this data as it affects the markets. And this actually caused the market to drop a bit, especially those Chinese tickers. The Chinese GDP for Q4 was basically at 5.2%. That is a little bit lower than the 5.3% expectation. So that's worth noting. And then on top of that, we had even more news coming out. So when it comes to Tesla in particular, as you guys may have seen in my early video, Tesla has slashed the prices across its European EVs. It basically cut prices in Germany by about, well, depending on the model, between 4.2 and about 8% for its Model Ys and the different versions of the Model Ys. In France, we saw about 6.7% cuts. The Netherlands saw even more like that, and we saw even more in Norway. So lots of price cuts between, I would say, 4 and 8%, depending on the country throughout Europe. And that was negative news for Tesla, which caused it to drop. In my video, I mentioned that Tesla had to hold 212. That was a very important support. If we lost that, Tesla would turn a lot more bearish. If we held it, Tesla would have potential to bounce. And today we managed to hold 212 very, very nicely. So the question is, what's going to happen tomorrow? Well, before I say that, we also have some more data about the Fed. A bunch of these Fed speakers came out today. We had Bowman, Barr, Woods, and Williams. They all basically said something very similar, that the Fed is not ready to officially cut rates in March. That is different from what the market was basically expecting. The market was pricing in a Fed cut in March, and that is now, the odds of that happening has gone down, and the odds of them kind of like pausing has gone up. So that's very, very important. We'll be watching to see how this goes. But with that being said, that's why the market started to sell off the way it did. That played a big role in causing that. Much of the manufacturing numbers were quite decent, not that bad overall. I wouldn't say that that played a big role in causing this. It had more to do with just the Fed and some fear and other things like that. Now, with the market adjusting the way it has, we have some earnings coming out. We have TSM, Texas Capital Bank, and a couple more banks going into tomorrow. Very, very minor earnings, nothing too crazy. And then one thing that's very important to note is that the fear increase index is approaching neutral, but there's a big shift in the data. So you can see right here, our indicators are showing the puts and call positioning has gone up like crazy. We're approaching fear right now. We're seeing a lot of puts being bought. People are expecting the market to crash. They're becoming fearful. They're starting to panic a little bit. With that happening, when the market becomes fearful, that's when you want to be a little bit careful, because will the market just straight up just tank from this point on? It's always a possibility. Or are the market makers going to try to squeeze shorts again, try to trick them? When people start buying more puts, this is when they start to do that. There's a real possibility of that. The VIX, excuse me, sorry guys, I apologize for that. The VIX has reached fear mode. It actually managed to close above the 50 moving average on the daily time frame. This is once again very important. Markets becoming fearful, but this is when you want to be very careful simultaneously. Some good news did come out. We saw Mazda agree to adopt Tesla's supercharger, which is good news for them for 2025. Tesla's getting more and more exposure thanks to that, and more revenue. In terms of its price action, we still have an outperform rating from Wedbush, which is not bad whatsoever for Tesla. This just came out recently. The price price ratio is dropping to this low as Tesla is still looking relatively weak, but it managed to hold 212 for the time being. On top of this, we tend to see bullish days only about 48% of the time on Thursdays and about 49% of the time on Fridays. We also tend to see more volatility at noon and also at 2 and 3 p.m. for Tesla. Besides that, that's pretty much it in terms of the main pieces of data. Volume for Tesla went down to 102 million. The question is Tesla going to bounce? Well, the first thing I just want to mention is that we have some very, very interesting indicators. So when you look at the daily time frame on Tesla, like this, you could see we have a potential reversal candlestick that's forming. We got this wick underneath. Tesla could try to push up from here, at least based off what the daily is showing us. As long as it holds 212, that's what the daily is suggesting. On SPY, we have a potential reversal candlestick for a temporary bounce. We closed above the daily 20 EMA, which suggests that this thing could push up to fill this gap as well. And then I just want to call out that the daily looks bullish on Tesla and SPY just temporarily. And then for VIX, for the VIX, we basically rejected just under the 200 EMA. And even though we did close green on it, we do have this big gap to fill. We got this big rejection on it. So we'll see if this starts to cool off to fill that gap or not. If that happens, this all is suggesting that a bounce could be coming for stocks out there. The dollar got a rejection off the 200 EMA. This could turn bearish. This tends to be like a doji that's forming. So that could lead to a test of the 5 EMA at 103, which could drag the market up. So with that being said, what do I think is going to play out? What on earth am I predicting? Guys, I'm going to try to be unbiased and tell you guys what I think is going to happen. Let's start off with Tesla. So when it comes to the way the market moves, I just want to mention that Tesla sometimes can move on its own, but there's always that external piece of news that I can't always predict perfectly. So I'm not always going to be perfect. I am a human. I make mistakes. I don't always know what the news is going to say, but I can tell you a lot based off technicals. So what's going on with Tesla? On the 4-hour time frame, we actually have a very strong bullish divergence, which suggests that a bounce could be coming. But in order for this to bounce, we have to hold some key support and try to break some resistance. So if we're bearish, let me go over all the scenarios. I know people out there may not always listen to these, but just be prepared for this. To be bearish, you need to see Tesla come down like this, and we have to lose 212. We have to close below that, lose 212, and then Tesla will have more potential downside. If we lose 213.8, watch 212. If we lose 212, we have some support at 210, followed by 207. There's a good chance that if we turn bearish, that's going to happen. So watch 212 as critical support. If we're bullish on Tesla, you want to break this resistance from this high right here, which is where our gap starts at this 217.6 area. If we manage to push like this, we break 217, look for a push for 220, and then we could look for a nice move like that for an attempt to hold up. If we break this yellow resistance right here at 217.6, that's going to be the bullish case. What do I think is going to happen? What is my opinion? Well, looking at the fact that the VIX is suggesting some downside is coming for it and upside for the overall market, the dollar index suggests that there's upside coming for the overall market. SPY suggests the same thing, so does the QQQ. And the fact that Tesla's daily candlestick is showing the same thing, the fact that it held 212 all suggests with this bullish divergence that we have many confluences suggesting that Tesla's going to try to test the 20 EMA at 220 very soon. So I always go over the bullish and bearish cases just to prepare you guys, but I favor that Tesla is going to attempt to break 217 and we might try to fill this gap to 220. I favor that a little bit more. I think we held support very nicely. We got a nice bullish divergence. There's a very, very good chance Tesla will attempt to hold its support and try to push back up to 220 by Friday. I think that's very, very probable. Now, if I'm wrong, guys, in order for me to be wrong, we have to see this thing close below 212, and I will admit defeat because since I can't always predict the news is an external factor I can't always predict, but I still favor 220 is coming once we break that resistance. I think that's most likely going to happen. Tesla will push to 220, then maybe trade sideways from there. But I think a nice push is coming to the upside very soon. What about for SPY? What do I think is going to happen to SPY? Well, there's always a bearish and a bullish case. Then I'm going to tell you what I think will happen. We have a key support at 471.4, and we also have 470. If we lose, excuse me, sorry guys, I apologize about that. If we lose 470, we're going to be sinking all the way down to 468. If we're bullish, so basically that's the bearish case right there. If we're bullish, you want to see it break above 473. If that breaks, we're going to be pushing for 475. In my opinion, we're most likely going to see SPY try to break 473. I think it's going to try to push here, and we're eventually going to break out to 475 by Friday. I anticipate that a bounce is coming based off the daily close and also based off the fact that we have a nice little bounce that formed right here. I do see a slight, not really a bullish divergence, but I do see an attempt to rebound that could be coming. I don't really see a bullish divergence, but I do see a bullish cross in the PPO pending. So there's a bullish and a bearish case. I'm prepared for anything, but I do favor that this thing is going to attempt to break 473 and try to fill this gap very soon. I favor that a little bit more. On the QQQ, we have something very similar. We have a gap to fill up above. If we're bearish, you want to see it lose 406 then 404. A close below 406 is a little bit more bearish. If we close above 408, that's going to be bullish. If we break 408, we have 409, which is where we have an unfilled gap, and then 410, like around here, as resistance. My gut tells me that I favor. So I went over the bearish case and the bullish case, by the way. Basically, if we lose 406, we're a little bit more bearish. We have 404 and 402 as supports. But I favor the bullish case instead. Okay, I favor the bullish case. I think we're most likely going to try to break 409, fill this gap, and make our way up to 410 very, very soon. I think the QQQ is going to try to bounce, and then we're going to see some sideways price action in the 410s. For Nvidia, this thing dropped quite a bit. It actually pushed back up towards this imbalance. Now it's trading sideways. And I wouldn't be surprised if Nvidia attempts to push back up to 565. We could even try to make our way up back up to this top. If we break 565, so we have 562.5 then 565. If that breaks, watch 567 to 568. If that breaks, there's 570, then 572.5. For support, make sure you watch 557, 555, and 552. If we lose 552, our next target is 550, then 547. I think Nvidia will most likely attempt to go higher. It might try to backtest this high right here at 568. It's still looking quite strong. It doesn't look like it's ready to fall yet. It actually got bought back up, and I think that it's going to attempt to get back above 565. So I favor the upside a little bit more. On Aapl, if we're bearish on Aapl, you want to see this thing basically sink and lose 181. If we lose 181, first there's 182, then 181. If we close below 181, we're going to turn bearish. 180 is going to be coming, then 178 below that. If we're bullish, you want to see this thing basically break above. First off, we want to fill this gap at 183 and try to break above 183.5. If we break that, our next target is going to be 185 on Aapl to fill this gap. What do I think is going to happen? I think that Aapl is going to basically attempt to break 183.5, and I think we might get very close to the 184s, but it may take a few days for us to get up to 185. There's definitely potential for Aapl to bounce. However, I still have that view. I still favor that somewhat, and I'm going to be watching that very, very closely. I also want to mention that when looking at Aapl, right, where is it? It's right here. Aapl basically has a nice uh, a potential bottoming tail over here. You guys can see this nice wick that formed. And we're starting to curl on the MACD. So I'm going to be looking for a push up to 183.5 for the 20 EMA test. And if we break that, 185 is a real possibility. There's a potential Wyckoff accumulation as well. You could interpret that for a temporary bounce. So with that being said, guys, I went over the majority of the tickers. I have something very important coming up, so I have to make this video kind of quick. I just want to mention that when it comes to the VIX, on the 4-hour time frame, the VIX got this big rejection. It's barely holding above the 200 EMA. If it loses this, it could reject and fill this gap. So it is looking like it went up and came back down. And simultaneously, on the daily time frame, there's a potential rejection that came here, and we have a gap to fill. So that suggests that downside is possible for the VIX, which could push the market up. Same thing with the dollar, it rejects off the 200 EMA. On Microsoft, I just want to mention that this could kind of push a little bit towards 390 and even 392 before it trades sideways. So I could see a little push coming to the upside. The daily looks kind of bullish to 392. For AMD, it's holding above 160. As long as it holds this, we're going to be looking for a push towards 162.5 and 165. Favors the bulls somewhat more. For Coinbase, although this came down, it's trying to hold. If it could break above 135 at the 50 EMA, it has this nice gap over here to look at towards 140. I'm going to be looking for a bounce towards 140 if it breaks above 135. Watch that very carefully as resistance. Otherwise, it's going to chop if it doesn't break it. Now, the daily on Google looks a little strong and might actually push a little bit to fill the gap at 143.5. Then it might just trade sideways after that. So I could see a little pop on Google, but I don't think it's looking that strong. I'm not seeing it just exploding. I think it might just push a few points here and there. For Amazon, this thing held above the daily 20 EMA. It held above 150. If it does bounce, we have a gap to fill on the daily time from towards 153. It could push to the upside. I do have that as a possibility. And then for Meta on the daily looks kind of bullish and might push up towards this resistance at 370. Look for a 370 retest, and if that breaks, 374 is a possibility. So with that being said, I think that the market dropped a bit thanks to the Fed, but there is a good chance that technicals suggest a bounce is coming. Now, as far as Tesla goes, guys, I can't always predict everything perfectly. I'm not a perfect human being. I don't know what the future holds in terms of data and the news. I'm not going to be perfect. But based off technicals and based off the many confluences of different indicators, many indicators are showing bullish divergences and potential bounces coming to the markets. And also Tesla held up very nicely, especially after that daily candlestick. So that's, to me, suggests it's going to try to break 217 and try to push up to fill this gap. There's a very good chance it's going to try to bounce, and I do favor that more. I also went over the bearish cases, so make sure you watch that 212 support just in case. But I favor the upside temporarily for Tesla. All right, guys, thank you for listening. Have a great day. I have some errands to run, so I have to be a little quick for today. I'll see you guys very soon tomorrow morning, and peace out.